Nestled in the midst of a 1,600-page bill is a 5-page section that is highly contested right now. The proponents of the bill argue that Section 219 of the National Defense Authorization Act of 2027 will improve our military and technology capabilities and thus national security by increasing cooperation with the government of Israel, its military, and industry. The opponents of the bill argue that it will jeopardize the United States sovereignty by merging its military and technology capabilities with that of a foreign nation. It's a pretty short section, so I thought we would look at it and decide for ourselves. Section 219, United States-Israel Defense Technology Cooperation Initiative on page 102. A. The Secretary of Defense shall designate an executive agent responsible for synchronizing cooperative efforts between the United States and Israel to expand and accelerate bilateral defense technology research, development, testing, evaluation, integration, and industrial cooperation. Thus far, I have no alarm bells going off. They throw the phrase cooperation out a few times. Israel got some smart people. We got lots of smart people. There could be a lot to be gained out of cooperation. Let's keep reading. So this synchronization of cooperative efforts is going to be established by 1. Identifying jointly developed or Israeli origin technologies with operational utility for potential in integration into United States systems and programs of record. Alright, I wouldn't call this a merger, but it does make me a little uncomfortable because at the end of the day, Israel is still a foreign country. I think regardless of the foreign nation, a country integrating technology developed entirely in a foreign country to its own government systems and military is naive at best and outright stupid at worst. And the reason being, when a technology is developed completely outside of our bounds and our ability to keep an eye on it, it makes it very easy for that foreign country to install backdoors and ways to spy on us and our data. And this is not a moral judgment. Frankly, any country that's doing what's in their best interest would consider doing this. I mean, we already did this stupid song and dance before. Back in 2024, The Hill reported on how Chinese companies like Huawei and ZTE have infiltrated our communications network by selling their equipment to providers at artificially cheap prices. I wonder why they might do that. And these Chinese-origined cell tower technologies were installed near military bases, making our domestic and defense communications vulnerable to Chinese espionage. Now, you can replace the word Chinese in this article with any other foreign country, and the threat is equally viable. And I know our politicians love to just scream at the top of their lungs from the rooftops that Israel is our greatest ally, so even though they're a foreign nation, they would never do this to us. I think it's a good time to remind everyone about Jonathan Pollard, who in 1984 sold numerous state secrets, including NSA's 10-volume manual on how the US gathers its signals intelligence, and disclosed the names of thousands of people who had cooperated with the US intelligence agencies. He was apprehended in 1985 and pleaded guilty to spying for and providing top-secret classified information to Israel. Israel government acknowledged part of its role in Pollard's espionage in 1987, but did not admit to paying him until 1998. And when he was done serving his prison sentence on account of committing espionage against the United States on behalf of Israel, he went ahead and relocated to Israel, and Israel was cool with that. I mean, American-made overall is great, but I don't understand how it's not de facto American-made and developed in our government and military systems. Alright, moving on. 2. Ensuring collaborative research initiatives involving government, private sector, and academic institutions in the United States and Israel is done in a manner that protects sensitive technology and information and the national security interests of the United States and Israel. Now, I don't really have an issue with the collaborative research initiatives portion of this. I think collaborative research is good. I think if we did more collaborative research with China and Russia, we might have a less adversarial relationship with them, and I will extend out the same courtesy to Israel. The part in subsection 2 that I think gets a little hairy is the part about the national security interests of the United States and Israel. I think at a time like this, it is good to recall a quote from Lord Palmerston of England in the 1800s when he said, "We have no eternal allies and we have not perpetual enemies. Our interests are eternal and perpetual, and those interests it is our duty to follow." Shorthand of that, countries don't have allies, they have interests. Sometimes those interests align with those of other countries, in which case you can temporarily consider those countries as an ally. But ultimately, the duty of a non-treasonous politician is to always prioritize the best interests of their own country and their citizens. Maybe you didn't like the fact that I picked a quote from a politician in England. Let's bring it back to our side of the pond. George Washington in his farewell address to the people of the United States. "It is our policy to steer clear of any permanent alliances with any portion of the foreign world." What happens when a time comes that our interests diverge from that of a foreign government? Does having this sort of language in a law make it more difficult for the United States to truly prioritize its own best interests? I'm not saying you can't play nice with other countries, but why the hell would we care about the interests of another country beyond how it benefits us? Especially at a time our politicians clearly don't give a crap about the best interests of the American people. I mean, we got homeless veterans. Our kids literally can't read. People are struggling to afford groceries. Most of Gen Z and millennials can't afford to buy a house to start a family. As usual, wages aren't keeping up with inflation. That is, if you can even find a decent job. And we are walking the tightrope of getting pulled into another war in the Middle East. On whose behalf? In conclusion, codifying into law any consideration for the national security interests of a foreign country is absolutely retarded. Before we proceed, if you enjoy digging through the public catacombs we call the internet, and occasionally on crappy politicians on both sides of the aisle, please consider subscribing. Subsection 3, facilitating the transition of technologies from research and development into procurement and acquisition pathways. I don't have a particular issue with this subsection. Subsection 4, establishing frameworks for joint ventures, licensing agreements, and United States-based co-production or manufacturing partnerships with Israeli industry. I again don't have a particular issue with subsection 4. It does say United States-based co-production and manufacturing, and in general, I am on the side of bringing manufacturing back to America as much as we reasonably can. I do wonder why this needs to be codified into law, because if you're a German or a Japanese company and you want to come to America and put a car manufacturing plant or another product manufacturing plant, Congress doesn't have to pass a bill for it. So I do wonder if there is more to this paragraph that I'm not understanding. If you guys have any ideas, please put it down in the comments. Oh boy, subsection 5 is a mouthful. Let's see. Coordinating with relevant Department of Defense components, including the Irregular Warfare Technical Support Directorate, Capability Development and Innovation Divisions, the Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering, the Defense Innovation Unit, the United States Israel Operations Technology Working Group, Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, aka DARPA, the Missile Defense Agency, and the United States Space Command, the military departments, and other Department of Defense entities as appropriate to align efforts and avoid duplication. So a few thoughts on this paragraph. I see the United States Israel Operations Technology Working Group, and we also know that we already provide Israel with weapons technology and financial and operational support for whatever type of endeavor they're going on. So why do we need to codify this into law? What more does this bill, this section 219, provide that the United States Israel Operations Technology Working Group doesn't currently provide? In my opinion, the Israeli and American militaries and intelligence departments have already had a history of an unhealthy level of codependent integrated operations for two allegedly sovereign different countries. So why now are they trying to sneak this 5 pages in a 1,600-page bill and codify it into law? It makes me think I'm missing something, like there's more to this than what we're just reading on the surface level. But even beyond that, I'm a little concerned with the phrasing of avoiding duplication. And the reason for that is if we're trying to figure out if this bill is leading towards a merger or it's simply an effort to solidify cooperation, well, the difference between merger and cooperation is at the end of a merger, you're left with one entity versus in cooperation, two entities are doing the same research, looking into the same topic, and they're sharing information with each other, or they have two separate teams who come and work together on a shared goal. If it's cooperation and not a merger, then you need two distinct entities working towards the same goal. Therefore, you need a level of duplication. So avoiding duplication is a little concerning to me. Now, I suppose they could mean that among all these different US departments, they don't want to duplicate efforts on a given project. But if that's the case, then perhaps the language in the law should be a little more clear. Because when it's not clear and explicit, it can be interpreted 9 ways to Sunday. And the last subsection of Section A, 6, is promoting joint training exercises and information sharing mechanisms to enhance operational readiness to deploy jointly developed technologies. Then I don't have a major issue with this one. You are supposed to have joint training exercises and share information to a certain extent with countries that are purportedly your allies. And approaching towards the end of the bill here, Section A we just read applies to the following domains of counter unmanned systems, including aerial, maritime, and ground platforms, anti-tunneling and subterranean threats, which I'm sure Israel is really interested in, missile and air defense technologies, which again I'm sure Israel is extra interested in right now, artificial intelligence, quantum and machine learning and autonomous systems, directed energy and advanced sensing, cyber defense, electronic warfare and digital resilience, biotechnology, biomanufacturing and medical defense, network integration, data fusion and contested logistics. We're going to come back to that actually. Defense industrial base cooperation, manufacturing and co-production. This giant blank check of other emerging technologies as jointly agreed by the United States and Israel. Do they need to pass another bill for 10 or do some unelected officials in the State Department or the Department of Defense or whatever you want to call it just get to agree to that? So that would be one question. I mean, this seems to include pretty much every domain. Number 3 makes the most sense to me because of the new breed of missiles coming out of Iran right now. I thought directed energy was a bit humorous because do you guys remember a couple of years ago people were talking about directed energy weapons and space lasers and they got labeled conspiracy theorists for doing so? Well, it seems like they have been vindicated and the conspiracy theorists win another one. Now, the 2 domains that do unsettle me a little bit are first being the artificial intelligence, quantum machine learning, and autonomous systems. I mean, domain 4 over here is some of the most emerging, up-and-coming, vital technologies humanity is attempting to develop. They keep telling us, oh, we gotta beat China to artificial intelligence and quantum computers. Well, why the hell would you share some of your most valuable up-and-coming technology, research, and innovations with anyone? You keep your mouth shut and keep that shit to yourself. What do you mean? Also, network integration and data fusion. You can't have 2 separate networks just cooperate, okay? Network integration is the merger of 2 separate networks into one. And they're not saying data sharing, they're saying data fusion. Now, to provide a more comprehensive understanding of my concerns with sharing some of our most advanced technologies and integrating our networks and fusing our data with Israel, I would like to take a look at some articles Israeli newspapers have been publishing for the last decade. This is from 10 years ago. Israel National News. Israel, China in talks to become major economic allies. Economic Minister Durai discusses free trade agreement with Chinese ambassador as Israel indicates its focus is shifting to the east. The Jerusalem Post. Why Israel's future is being decided in the Indo-Pacific, an opinion piece. Times of Israel. Israel's future is East, not Sparta. The Jewish Journal. Pivoting East, Israel's developing strategic relationship in Asia. Israel National News. As the West dies, Israel's future lies with rising Asia. This one is from 2025, so that's some future concerns with the shifting tides in Israel's stance and approach to the West versus East dilemma. How about historical concerns? Let's see. Israel passes US military technology to China. Secret US missile and electro-optics technology was transferred to China recently by Israel, prompting anger from the US. US military technology sold by Israel to China upsets Asian power balance. Israel's Levi fighter bomber was designed to be one of the deadliest weapons in the air. However, it now has been revealed that after Israel discontinued the largely US-funded project, it sold China the plans for the Levy, whatever, and the associated secret US technology. US furious with Israel after sale of advanced military technology to China. Washington asserted that the Israeli defense minister's head of defense export control, Meir Shalit's authorization of the sale of miniature cooling systems was in direct violation of Israel's pre-existing obligation to the United States. This one's from 1993. Israel selling China military technology, CIA chief asserts. And of course, don't forget about the spying. 2019, Israel accused of planting mysterious spy devices near the White House. 2026, Pentagon raised threat of Israeli spying on US to highest level, sources say. The counterintelligence threat level was raised by the Defense Intelligence Agency in recent weeks after growing concerns that Israelis' espionage had become more aggressive than usual. That's really funny. Like, yeah, we know they're usually spying on us, but it's getting a little more aggressive than usual. And look, I'm not so naive. I expect every country to spy on one another, allies or not. But maybe that's why we shouldn't just integrate our networks and data and hand over some of our most advanced and sensitive technology over to any country, let alone a country who has a history of selling our technology to allegedly our greatest enemy or whatever, while also spying on us and openly talking in their newspapers about how their future is with Asia and China rather than the West, right after directly contributing to sucking us dry by dragging us into countless Middle Eastern conflicts that we had no business being a part of. And they're doing it again. They're doing it again. All the while also invading now their neighbors in the north, Lebanon. And I've tried to stay out of the current conflicts in the Middle East, particularly Palestine, as much as I can. But there is a moral point to be made that we are funding this, we're backing this, we're sending weapons and technology to assist the Israelis commit their war crimes without managing or intending to put a leash on it. Frankly, I don't want my money going to any foreign country. I don't want my taxes going to any foreign country, but it is especially egregious for our government to force us to have blood on our hands by virtue of taking our money and sending it over to Israel and then letting them do whatever they want. Alright, you had October 7th to blame for what you're doing in Gaza. What about the Christian towns getting rampaged in the area by Israeli settlers? What's your justification for that, government of Israel? Oh, I'm sorry. Can you speak louder? I couldn't hear you. Oh, you don't have one? Got it. In conclusion, in my opinion, is this bill merging the United States and Israeli militaries? Yes and no. When people think of merging two militaries, I think they think of just throwing all soldiers from the two militaries together into one pile, and now you have a shared military between the two countries. That's not exactly what's happening here. What seems to be happening here is merging the IT networks, data infrastructure, technology, research components of the the two countries, which I would argue could be a precursor step to further integration and merger of the two militaries. Now, depending on how it's executed, one could argue it's a little less than a merger, but I think any honest discussant has to admit that this is well beyond just cooperation. Now, I know Thomas Massey was trying to get an amendment passed to strip Section 219 from the 2027 NDAA, which is what we were just reading, and the rules passed prevented the stripping of Section 219. And today, as I'm recording this, they're going to vote on the NDAA with Section 219 included. Unfortunately, I think it will pass. If I'm wrong, I'm happy to eat my words, but considering just how friendly and considerate our politicians are of Israel, far more than the needs and desires of the American people, I would be shocked if it does not pass, especially considering how they shoved it into a 1,600-page bill and they're going to hold this whole bill hostage to Section 219. But I'm curious to hear what you guys think. Do you think it's a good bill? Do you think it's a not so good bill? Are there certain provisions in the bill that you like? Are there certain sections you don't like? So put your opinions in the comments. As always, if you enjoy digging through the public catacombs we call the internet, please subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.